In this episode, I have got a good friend of mine and fellow podcaster Junaid Ahmed joining me in the studio to distill his 20 years of experience in audio and video design into 20 minutes of what you need to know to create a home studio that elevates your authority. And when you walk away from this episode, you might be surprised to find that the quote-unquote secret has nothing to do with your tech at all. Welcome to Insider Secrets to a Top 100 podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Elmer. Let's make your business binge-worthy. Junaid, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you here today. Thanks for making the time.
Excited to be here.
Well, we got a lot to dig into. And Junaid, something that not many people know about you, aside from being an incredible tech wizard, genius when it comes to all things tech and all things related to the setup of a home studio and of a podcast, is that you're also a beekeeper. And something that not many people know about bees is the way that they design their hives. And one of the things, I think the easiest way to put it is they maximize their space with very minimal resources. And I think this is such a great parallel to a well-designed home podcast studio, having that same kind of intentionality and efficiency with whatever you have available, whether it's your office, whether it's a bedroom, whether it's a closet, like where I started my podcast. I would be curious to get your take on what are some of the biggest mistakes that people make when setting up their home studios, and how can they bring more of this intentionality to their studio design, even if they have minimal resources?
That's a great first question, first of all, Courtney. And I love the parallel between beehives and a home studio, because when you think about it, this is our home. This is how we show up. This is our first impression to the entire world. So the reason we want to focus on creating the space from wherever you are is because that's who you are. That's where you're starting. You're not going to make fun of a little, 1-year-old trying to learn how to walk, because we know better as human beings. But the thing is, as we grow older, we kind of forget those small little things. So I say, start with where you are, start with whatever device you have, because as long as you get started, that's the key. If you get started, then you'll start to see things from a totally different perspective. A story that I love to tell is when the pandemic hit, my cousin was saying, hey, since we're spending so much time at home, I'm going to set up a garden in the backyard. I'm going to have fruit trees and vegetables and whatnot. I was like, dude, that's so cool. I want to do that too. And then about 4 or 5 weeks later, it's like, dude, check out, I've got peppers, I've got tomatoes. And I'm like, dude, what happened? What did you do? I still don't have that. He's like, well, I got started. I set up the boxes. I put the soil, I planted the seeds. 5 weeks later, I have the stuff. It's like, oh, I didn't start yet, even though I want to, right? So the key philosophy behind all of this is no matter how many equipment that you can research online or talk to people about, it's all about getting started, getting that foot in the door, getting that first rep in so that you can make changes and get better at it.
Well, it's funny, Junaid, because exactly to your point there, I think what a lot of people think about creating a great podcast studio is that it's about the gear. It's about the sound quality. It's about the acoustics. But there's something in your book, 7 Stages of Home Studio Evolution, that you say that I love, which is it's not about the gear or the sound. It is about that, but it's not just about that. It's about how your dedication to your craft shows your dedication to your audience. And I'm curious to hear your take on how would you say that this perspective translates to designing a space that really supports your work and ultimately builds deeper trust with your listeners?
I think what it comes down to is when you showcase where you are currently to people, they relate to you much more easily, right? I get comments on my studio, the studio's so cool. And I always want to go back to where I started, because people kind of lose that aspect of the journey, is that, that I used to have a bad studio, that I used to have bad videos. I used to have bad audio, right? There's something that Seth Godin says, people will come up to him like, oh my God, I'm going to have a New York bestseller book. And he says, well, where's your bad writing? And it's like, what do you mean bad writing? I'm like, well, if you haven't written any bad stuff, you can't get good, because you've got to do the reps and get through that. So coming back to that question, how can you create better connection with the audience just by showing up who you are. Even if you can just record a live video or a short video inside your group and on your phone, you're showing people where you are and that you're willing to make mistakes, that you're willing to take that first step.
That's such a great point, because so often we go into something new with this expectation that we have to get it right and that we don't want to make a mistake. And I think deep down, there's a fear there, and a very real fear that we all share as humans. We don't want people to laugh at us. We don't want to be rejected. We want people to like us, to be accepted. And, some of us take that to an extreme. Recovering people pleaser over here. But one of the things, Junaid, that I love about the way that you approach helping someone set up a home studio is that it's not going in and saying, okay, you need $10,000 worth of equipment. If that's the stage where you are, then okay, great. We'll talk about that. But also not everyone is at that stage. And so knowing how every creator's journey is unique and knowing where you're at can ultimately help you make smarter decisions about your setup. Let's go through the first 4 stages that you talk about when it comes to this home studio evolution, just to help us understand what they are, why they're important, since this is where most of our listeners are likely going to find themselves.
Yeah, so the first 4 stages are, number 1, the novice. We all start at this, right? I started at it. We all have $1,000 camera in our pockets that you don't pay attention to, right? The second stage is the hobbyist. You've invested some additional money on getting a good microphone. Then comes stage 3, which is the enthusiast, where you spend some additional money on lighting and better camera and whatnot. And then the semi-pro. We're like, okay, I've got the good camera, I've got the good lighting, I've got some good sound improvement. What else can I do in this space? You might be adding an overhead camera, you might be going in different places or having even more conversations. But the reason is not to go from stage 1 to 2 to 3 just quickly, but to actually practice in those stages the craft of talking to the camera, the craft of telling a good story. I've been browsing the different social media networks and watching videos of Jim Rohn and Bob Proctor and Tony Robbins. These are excellent storytellers. Like, they are so concise in what they're saying. And how did they get there? Not overnight. They spent so much time saying so many words to come down to, hey, this is the message that I'm delivering, so that people are motivated, people are inspired by that little sentence. So that's what we're really working on in these different levels. And when you're really comfortable with yourself, with the message that you're putting out, then you're like, okay, I love what I'm doing. How can I level up the quality of my content? And so the clients that are coming to me that are ready to spend the 10K, the 20K, the 30K, they've already done all of that work. And they know that they can hit the ground running as soon as they have the setup.
As I listen to you share this, Junaid, thinking back over my own journey, I see myself at all of these different stages. When I had my very first microphone, you're going to laugh at me. It was a blue Snowball. The little tiny one on like that. They're going to be like, that was the most horrible mic you could have ever had. But it was what I started with. It was what I could afford. I think it was like a $40 mic. And then I quickly upgraded to the $80 mic, the Yeti that I bought off of eBay, secondhand. And I was recording in my master bedroom closet. So I did audio only. This was before video podcasting was what it is now. But I remember people would get on to interview with me and they're like, we're not doing video. I'm like, nope, we're not doing video. Like, nobody wants to see my closet here in the background, but that was what I had. And the closet was because it was the best place that I could get sound in the house. And I had a toddler running around. So it was also the quietest room in the house. And I would tell my husband, I'd say, please keep him out of the room. Like, I'm going to be back here for an hour recording. Like, I need quiet. And that was what my podcasting journey looked like when I started. And I'll never forget when I actually transitioned into my office once my son went to school and I had a quiet house during the day. And then I'm sitting at my desk with the Yeti microphone, but now suddenly I'm in a bigger space. And so the sound was different. And I learned as I go. And that's my point, is that the equipment that I have now, which I'm even looking at, okay, I'm getting a new light and I got to do this and the camera and the but the equipment that I have now was not the equipment that I started with. And I've had my podcast for 5 years.
Yeah.
5 years. So that journey took time. So it sounds like the goal is not to just hurry up and get to stage 7 as quickly as possible. And yet to maybe find a balance between also not settling at the stage where you are and always striving for that excellence, but doing the best with what you have. Can you speak to how do we strike a balance with that? If we want to show up as, the $30,000 person worth of equipment, but yet all we have is the $80 microphone, how do we strike that balance between not just settling, but also not feeling like we're not good enough or we're not ready enough to do the work that we're doing because we don't have the fancy setup yet?
Well, the first thing that you want to do is find a community that's going to empower you, that's going to encourage you, that's going to support you through all of the different stages of your own growth. When I wanted to become a cyclist or, do more cycling, I joined a cycling group. They were able to support me. They were able to lead me on. And when I was falling behind, the fastest rider would come back and, put a little bit of hand on my back and just push me. And I was like, oh my God, I'm getting, a 50-watt boost right here without having to do all the work. So when you find people around you, it's so much easier to show up with your higher self on the video or on the audio. So having that community is going to give you 10x growth without having to spend that money. So as you're growing, you're then going to find the balance. Okay, now that I've grown this much, I'm ready to level up my microphone. I'm ready to add some more lighting. I'm ready to, and then you're going to probably be pulled into the gear acquisition syndrome as well. But having the people around you support you throughout the journey is going to be really helpful. So I think that's the best thing that I can think of, because that's what journey that I went through, right? Just like you started in the closet with the microphone, the Snowball, and then Blue Yeti. I started with a Blue Yeti. I, in fact, bought a $150 Blue Yeti, but I didn't use it because I was so scared. Like, how do I even start the conversation? So my first season, and I'll proudly share this, was recorded in my car, right? So embrace the journey, because that's what's really going to help you grow and strike that balance.
And as you're sharing this, something that's coming up for me is, yes, start with where you are. Yes, accept that you are good enough, no matter how good your equipment is. And I think when we can detach the am I good enough from do I have good enough equipment, right? Good enough equipment doesn't make you good enough. You're already good enough to do what it is you do in the world. And chances are, as a business owner, you've got clients who sing your praises. You're getting referrals. You have people who admire what you do. They want to be a part of what you do. And the gear that you have has nothing to do with that. So I think, first of all, detaching that is really key. And then second of all, Junaid, it's really encouraging to hear, you and I know from some of our mastermind meetings, you'll press a button and there's a different camera and then there's a lights and they can do all these things and your sound is amazing. And to hear that you started in your car recording on your phone is also really encouraging, I know, to all of us listening today who are at different stages in our podcasting journey. So Junaid, what advice would you leave someone with who might be worried right now that, they don't look as professional and polished as a Joe Rogan or a Mr. Beast or some of these big podcasters that we aspire to be and that we look up to? What advice would you give them?
So something that's readily available for all of us is, number one, there are a lot of local podcast studios that you can go to practice your craft. You want a high quality video, but not want to spend that much money? Well, you could totally go to a local podcast studio and do that. So not only are you showing up with professionalism at the studio, but you're also showing up with your own authentic self in your home setup or home office. So that's something quickly that you can do to level up immediately, and then, show people that you care about the content, you care about the messaging, you care about how you show up, and it's going to help you get, stretch the studio space that you have for a longer time till you're starting to make that big money and be like, okay, I'm ready to spend the money.
And what about for those who maybe have zero budget right now? How could they optimize the space that they're in? Is there something simple that all of us should be doing to optimize the sound in our environment?
100%. So the number one thing that you want to do is make sure, especially if you're doing video, sit in front of a window so that you have really good lighting, because that is the key to all cameras. And if you focus on the lighting and focus on bringing the microphone as close to you as you can, I think you can go really far with that setup.
Honestly, that right there is so true. I can't tell you how many guests that I have on the show who podcast, and their microphone is almost like they don't want it in the frame or something. And so it's like way down and you can't see it. And I'm like, I can't hear you. It sounds like you're in a tunnel. Like, please bring it closer to your mouth. I'm like, I don't really want it in front of my face. I'm like, it doesn't have to be in front of your face, but it has to be close to your mouth. So, right there underneath you so we can see your face in the video, or right off to the side. And it makes a world of difference right there just in the sound. So true. Awesome. Well, Junaid, thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. And I'm excited to get into, okay, what are these stages? How do we self-identify with where we are in these stages? And then what is the next step that we should be looking towards? So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Did you catch it? The secret to building a home studio that elevates your authority is not falling into the trap of thinking that the tech is what's going to make you a top podcaster, but instead taking full ownership of where you are and knowing that it's enough. It's more than enough. It always has been enough. And simply seeking to make improvements as you go, as you can. And that's exactly what we're going to dive into in the next episode, where Junaid joins us back to walk you through how to identify what stage you're in as a podcast host, and what are some of the simple low-cost upgrades that you can make to the environment around you, wherever you are, to get the most out of your home studio space without overspending. That's all coming up next to help you make your business binge-worthy.